What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron. With week 3 pretty much all wrapped up, it's time to talk through my top 10 lessons learned and takeaways, where I give you guys the most important stats, data, usage trends, everything that you need to know from week 3 so you don't have to spend hours scrolling through box scores. Now, as always, if you enjoy, make sure down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's get straight into the rookie wide receiver report, the world famous rookie wide receiver report, as our first takeaway. And of course, the rookie wide receiver report is sponsored by Underdog. Make sure you check them out. They have a ton going on. When you use promo code RON, they'll match your first deposit up to $1,000. I have links in the description and the comment section down below. You can see here the promos are just insane. You got more money Mondays. You got a Mahomes free pick on Tuesday. You got the Pick'em lobby. You got drafts going on. You got MLB drafts. You got NHL's coming up. You got NBA coming up. On a weekly basis, we do the Battle Royales on this channel every Friday as well. Make sure you check all of that out. So when we talk about the rookie wide receiver report here, we have a lot to cover. All right, a lot happened. And the way that this is set up here is you have week 1 route participation through week 3. Route percentage is simply when a team passes the ball, is this player running a route? We want our players to run routes on pass plays. It's that simple. Targets per route run is just how much volume are you commanding on a per route basis. Anything above 20% is really good. Yards per route run, anything over 2 is really good, and that's just efficiency on a per route basis. First downs per route run, that's the first RR. That is anything over 10% is good, and that's just on a per route basis, how often are you moving the chains and just giving your team positive plays. And then PFF grade. That is just PFF's film grade. And in the past, when a player hits 80 plus, that's really, really good. When you hit 70 plus, that's still fine as well. But guys who have hit 80 plus in their rookie year are guys like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Odell Beckham and Mike Evans and, you know, all of the above of some of the best wide receivers ever, Michael Thomas as well. Now, first up, we have the man of the hour at the top. Malik Nabers is just an absolute monster. All right, he is now firmly on the Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson trajectory. And we look at since 1998, the top 12 wide receiver seasons in points per game. And this is what you needed, right? When you drafted Malik Nabers or you drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. in the second round of drafts, I will say Nabers, more of like a 3-4 turn guy in your home leagues. You needed this to be in the range of outcomes. And right now they're both pacing extremely well. Malik Nabers, just insanity, man. He goes out here and just has another monster game, 22.8 PPR points. It's just crazy what he's doing on the season right now. Like I said, he has more points per game than Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson at this point. He is pacing with a guy like Odell Beckham, who's just in a rare air. He had he has 18 targets last week. He comes out this week versus Cleveland, one of the best defenses in the NFL. He gives you 12 targets, 8 catches, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 28.2 PPR points. I believe he is the wide receiver 1 in all of fantasy right now, just from a scoring perspective. I mean, it's ridiculous. And you look at the per out numbers here, 30% targets per out run, bonkers. 2+ yards per out run, amazing. 12% first downs per out run, and then an 80+ PFF grade. Again, we're talking Jefferson, we're talking Chase trajectory, and he might honestly finish ahead of both of what those guys did in their rookie seasons. And then, of course, you have Marvin Harrison Jr., who also looked really good. He commanded 11 targets. Now, he's had back-to-back games now where he's commanded a high target share and then only caught like half of the balls. Of course, I mean, like your catch rate's not going to be 100%. You're not going to catch 100% of your targets. But if you can be more efficient in that department, he's leaving some points on the field, which is a positive. Like there's more meat left on the bone here with Marvin Harrison Jr. And even still, he gives you 5 catches, 64 yards, a touchdown. And now he, as well as Marv, as well as Malik Nabers, are now in the top 10 for wide receivers in points per game. We'll kind of see how Marv, climbs up the ladder from here. Week 1 was kind of a disaster for him. I think that it only gets better from here. If they both can get in that 17+ point per game range, they're both going to pay off in a big way. And to me, with all the receiver injuries right now, right, with like Puka and Cooper Kupp, and now you have Debo, and then you also have Waddle and Tyreek, where their quarterback is hurt as well. Certainly Malik Nabers is in the conversation for like top 6 wide receiver rest of season. Marvin Harrison Jr. is right in the conversation for top 12 rest of season as well. Now, again, we have Rome Odunze, as we sort of talk through, in weeks past, we've had Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers are going crazy, but Rome Odunze, not quite. But today, we have a box score of 11 targets for Rome Odunze. I will say his PFF grade is 58.8. PFF grade is probably the least important of the per route metrics, and his per route metrics are still lagging behind, but that's just because he had, his rookie debut, then where he hurt his knee, and then week 2 he comes back kind of hobbled off the knee. Whole offense sucks. Now we're starting to sort of round into form here with Rome Odunze, and he gives you 11 targets this week, 6 catches, 112 yards, and a touchdown on a 22.7 average depth of target. If he could have caught like 2 or 3 more balls, he could have pushed for like 150 plus on the day, and even still he gives you 2+ yards per out run on the day. He gives you 5 first downs. He caught 2 of 3 contested catches. Just really, really good stuff for a guy in Rome Odunze where, I came into last week when I talked about him on the rookie receiver report of, maybe he's Rashee Rice, where first 10 weeks he's not going to be startable. You're going to root for him on the rookie receiver report, and then down the stretch you'll throw him in and he'll be a playoff league winner. That's what it seemed like we were looking at for Odunze, but now he's very much in the wide receiver 3 conversation moving forward. Wide receiver 3 with upside, very easy flex play. We see what the upside looks like when he's getting targeted downfield by Caleb. Him and Caleb Williams clearly have some kind of chemistry going on. So sick across the board is really all I can say about Rome Odunze, where now this guy who just kind of seemed like a pure stash on your bench is now legitimately a weekly guy you can throw in your flex spot, which is absolutely massive. Then we have Brock Bowers here. Down week for him, but funny enough, like still elite across the board in his per route run numbers. 7.1 PPR points this week in a game where the Raiders get weirdly killed by the Panthers. Even still, 7.1 PPR points was good for the tight end 13 on the week, and he's still the tight end 2 in points per game here. Now, the only down part with Brock Bowers, you can see at the top, 60% of the routes in week 3. It's not great. We want that to get back up to 70% plus, but we're talking about the tight end 2 in points per game as a rookie. So the routes are going to come. They're going to come very soon, especially, they lose this game. Maybe they go into the next game and say, we want to make Brock Bowers the focal point. I also don't, this is me being a delusional Jets fan. You can see the name of the jersey behind me. This is me being a delusional Jets fan 1,000%. But Devontae Adams, Antonio Pierce coming out, yelling at everybody, say people were out there making business decisions. You can see Devontae Adams get traded, if not to my Jets, then somewhere else. And if that happens, Brock Bowers becomes the number 1 target in this offense and gets an even bigger bump than he's already had through his first 3 games. Then we could talk about Ladd McConkey. It's tough to really comment. Low volume passing offense. Justin Herbert gets hurt. Wide receiver 51 in points per game. But you can see here with the routes, 28% target per out run, 11% first downs per out run, 76.9 PFF grade. That's all amazing. He's more of like a redraft stash, or you play him in very obvious matchups. But outside of that, for dynasty purposes, Ladd McConkey very much looks the part. Then we have Xavier Worthy. Played last night. Didn't really do all that great. We're at 14.3% targets per out run at this point. He has just 10 points per game as the wide receiver 45 on the year right now. And sadly, Worthy gets a bit of a downgrade. He goes from someone that I had as like a wide receiver 2/3, where I'm just jamming him into lineups hoping for a big play. And he goes from kind of how we felt about him after week 1 to now being more of your flex, right? Like a desperation flex with huge, huge upside. But we lose the confidence of him having that floor to be like a top 30 wide receiver play on a given week, but he does still have that Rashee Rice upside of late season hammer. But for right now, in terms of weekly rankings, he's going to be going down, right? Where I think last week I might have had him at like wide receiver 28, where a lot of the times I was starting him, a lot of my subscribers were starting him as well. I think now you got to push him down a little bit. Bad news on A.D. Mitchell. I usually like these to be good news. A.D. Mitchell's at the bottom of this list here. I'm trying to figure out where I want to put my head. But you can see A.D. Mitchell's on the bottom of this list. The PFF grade's been brutal because he's had dropped balls and the efficiency's been bad. But he's been getting open and commanding targets, which is the most important thing I care about. But Josh Downs, pretty brutal for A.D. Mitchell. A.D. Mitchell, the thing about A.D. Mitchell that stings the most is one, Ashton Doolin ran more routes than him. So it wasn't even just Pierce. It wasn't even just Downs. He got relegated to like wide receiver 5, which is brutal. And the other thing that sucks is that I do truly believe he had some drops. He had some miscues with Richardson. I think if he brings in like half of those or 70% of those kind of like missed timing plays or concentration errors, I think he probably keeps his spot, or at least keeps his spot as the wide receiver 4. But because of the drops, because of the inconsistencies, now he gets dropped way down the depth chart. He's someone that you can drop in, your 10-man, 12-man office home leagues. He's someone I'm still bullish on in Dynasty. Again, he's getting open. He's commanding targets. It's all really good stuff. But near term for redraft, not great for A.D. Mitchell. I did want to touch on Jordan Whittington, who's right below me right here. Jordan Whittington goes from 0% of the routes to 41% to 40%. So not a big enough role to start him at this point, but 20% plus targets per out run, 2+ yards per out run, 13% first downs per out run, 70+ PFF grade. He hits our thresholds across the board. That's all you can really ask for from a day 3 guy. Really, the issue is that we need him to get from 40% of the routes to like 75%, and it has to happen before Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua come back by like week 7. So it's a really short runway, but I'm optimistic. After that, we have Xavier Legette, who gets a huge, huge bump because now we get Andy Dalton. We're going to have a passable offense here. He's still hovering around 50% of the routes. He's still inefficient, but a 15% target per out run is still pretty damn good for a rookie. And if he can command targets and if he can beat out Jonathan Mingo on this depth chart, especially with Adam Thielen Hurts, now you get the QB upgrade. You get Adam Thielen hurt for a few weeks. If he can climb up the depth chart and beat out John Mingo to be like wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, then we are really in business with Xavier Legette. He is going to be 100% on our waiver wire video. Then we have a guy towards the bottom here, right below A.D. Mitchell, Mason Tipton. I had never heard of this guy until today. He creeped up, right? You can see across the bottom this way. I don't know why I'm such an... Yeah, there you go. This way. 19 plus routes here, sorted by PFF grade. I didn't even know about this guy until I looked at the rookies with 19 or more routes. And Mason Tipton, he is a wide receiver for the Saints. He ran 31% of the routes in week 1, then 17%, and then 48%. So he is out there for half of the passing plays of the Saints offense. He has a 16.7% targets per out run. He is an undrafted free agent out of Yale, which is interesting. I don't really know what the upside is here. I'm not picking him up in like normal redraft leagues, but he's a guy. He's a guy. He's commanding targets. He's on the field for an NFL offense that scores points. So just someone to keep a tab on. All right, just remember the name Mason Tipton. Could be somebody interesting one day. And then kind of cleanup duty. The rest of the guys you can kind of disregard. You have, of course, the guys playing on Monday Night Football tonight. You have A.J. Barner, just a rotational guy for Seattle. Jalen Polk now running less routes this week with 49%. Still stashing in like really, really deep leagues, but looking pretty rough for Polk. Jalen McMillan still running routes, but he's just not producing because of Godwin and Evans. You have Johnny Wilson, who's actually very interesting, by the way. He goes from 13% of the routes to 17% to 31%. Of course, with the A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith injuries, he's now getting thrusted into some kind of role here. Super inefficient, but 16% targets per out run. He's just really fun, like 6'7", like tight end in a wide receiver's body. It could go really poorly, but it could also be really fun. So he's someone just to keep an eye on. We did have Troy Franklin, his debut on the rookie receiver report here. He goes from 0% of the routes in week 1 to 18% to 30%. Bad efficiency, but 26.3% targets per out run is still really good. He commanded 5 targets on his 31% of the routes. So that's pretty crazy, but we'd like some production to go along with that. I also do wonder how many of those routes came when the Broncos were kind of just killing the Buccaneers yesterday. Then we have Theo Johnson and JT Sanders, the 2 tight ends on the bottom. You can disregard them. Theo Johnson ran a season high in routes. Doesn't really matter when you have, a 7.1% targets per out run and a 0.36 yards per out run. Now let's get on to the rest of the video. Now I will be honest, full disclosure, we were running late today. Really just because there was honestly just a lot to talk about. And I think I probably spent too much time on the Saquon segment. So you're going to see like pictures are not fully sized where I need them to be yet. But this was a video we recorded in the summer, and rightfully so. We have gotten absolutely killed for it. Now, I do want to say the pushback on this video, the point was he was getting taken as the 110 to like 112 in home leagues. I believe that was too high. I believe that he was much more reasonable in the mid-second. You can actually see here, I'll show you guys this is literally from my draft guide. I had Saquon Barkley as my 18th ranked player, my RB7. So he was my 206. I was just off. I also don't, the guys in green are my targets. I still feel great about Achane. I still feel great about Nico Collins. Marv's been great. JT had an amazing day. Gibbs still looks fine. London, I think, is the really shaky one to have again ahead of Saquon at this point. But, it's not like I had him buried into like the 3rd round. I wasn't taking him. I did take him on some best ball teams as well. But, yeah, not great. I will solemnly wave the white flag. I will surrender the Saquon Barkley fade was dumb, right? When the question all offseason was, the 112 is brutal, right? Puka goes down. Jahmyr Gibbs has a hamstring pull. If you get the 112, what do? And the answer the entire time was take Saquon and hope for a massive, massive year. Now, I will say, like I said, I have him on some best ball teams, but not having him in any managed, I don't have him in a single high stakes that we streamed here. I don't have him in a home league. That stings super bad. And I think what it really comes down to, and someone said this to me on Twitter that remembers, I wasn't fading McCaffrey last year at all. Like, I wasn't fading him at all, but the fact, I came on here in these top 10 lessons learned videos and was just like, man, I just wish my monkey brain of just like Christian McCaffrey, Hall of Fame fantasy running back, goes to the best offense of his career. Why would that not be the 101? Why would Chase or Jefferson be the 101 there? Similar question here of this dumb IQ thing of, me being in the middle of, okay, well, Saquon Barkley hasn't been good in a while. He hasn't had a 20-plus point per game season since he was a rookie. He's had an ACL injury since then. He's had ankle issues since then. He goes to the Eagles, sure, but now no Kelsey. Does the offensive line regress? If there's a tush-push, does he get squeezed for goal line touchdowns? Does Jalen Hurts even dump it off to Saquon Barkley much when we just saw DeAndre Swift, who, not a good running back, but still career like 18% target share type of guy, went down to sub 10%? Simply, I should have been on either side of the IQ thing of Saquon Barkley has a point to prove versus his last team in the Giants, right? So now he has, this is kind of narrative stuff, but he has a chip on his shoulder. He has something to prove, and then he's the healthiest he's been behind the best offensive line of his life and the best offense of his life. Everything was right there. For me, though, I will kind of, if you want to kind of dive into what went wrong, this is kind of what my thoughts were. And honestly, this is, I'll actually just shout this out first too before I get into that. Saquon Barkley yesterday hit 21.66 miles per hour. That was his fastest recorded ball carrier speed since week 1 of 2019. 5 years and an ACL tear ago for Saquon Barkley. He hits 21.66 yesterday on his 65-yard touchdown run. And that was kind of the difference, right? That's when I knew it was time to wave the white flag. I actually put out a tweet. I think it's going to be right here. I waved the white flag. The Saquon fade was dumb. On pace for 50-plus catches, double-digit touchdowns, and has all the juice. And you don't have to worry about getting vultured on the goal line if you're just going to run it in from 65 yards out. Now, of course, it's not sustainable, but we now have been getting a ton of chunk plays, a ton of explosive plays from Saquon Barkley, and he just looks really good. Now, in terms of why I was fading, I do want to explain that a little bit, was when you look at yards at the contact per attempt here from like 2018 through 2023, he hadn't been over 3 yards at the contact per attempt since 2019-2018. Runs of over 15 yards. He had 20 on 261 attempts as a rookie. He hasn't even gotten close to that percentage since then. But I will say, as I look over this now, I wish what I did, because the biggest thing for me was that if he didn't hit the legendary season, right, the huge monster upside season in 2022, then when was it going to happen? You have to remember, in 2022, this was a good Giants offense. Saquon Barkley was really good. Like, this is what stung me. This is a tweet I had. So in 2022, Saquon was a huge target on this channel. He was somebody we thought was going to have a legendary season. Weeks 1 through 3, he has 22.6 points per game. It's wheels up. The Giants end up being a top 10 offense in EPA per play. He finishes at just 17.8 points per game and was just inefficient. He didn't score enough touchdowns. He wasn't a good enough player. Of course, are the Giants amazing? No, but if you have Brian Daboll as your play caller, who you're seeing now with Malik Neighbors, scheming him the ball, if you give that player to Daboll and he's scheming around Saquon, he's using Saquon as a centerpiece, and this Giants offense is a top 10 EPA per play unit, that's a good enough environment to me for him to hit 20-plus points a game. Not even like a legendary 23-plus, just 20-plus, and he couldn't even hit 18. So that was the tough part for me. And you guys might say, well, again, he was in a bad spot. The thing is, again, it was a good offense. He just didn't really produce. And if you want to say that, you can look at Breece Hall. If you look at all the legendary seasons that we've charted, so that's like 22, 23-plus points per game, there is not a single legendary season where the running back does not have 2.3 FPOE or better. And when we did our research, most of the time, those running backs showed a 2.5-plus FPOE per game or better in the few years prior. Now, FPOE per game is just simply your expected points, right? That's your EP, so that's just based on your attempts, your targets, your goal line rushes, all of that. How many points should you have? And your FPOE is on a per-game basis. How much are you exceeding that? Are you scoring touchdowns from far out? Are you, having a huge yards per carry? Are you just really outperforming your expectation. And Breece Hall, this is not even including 2024. This is 2022 and 2023 when his quarterback was Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, Tim Boyle, whatever. He still gave you a 2.5 FPOE per game. So my biggest thing was we can still see the talent shine through in these bad situations, and it just never did for Saquon. We look at his FPOE over his entire career. 2.5 as a rookie, right up top, 2.5 FPOE per game, then 1.3, then minus 5.1, then minus 1.1, then 0.3, then 0.4 in 2022 when it was supposed to be his year. And now this year we're at 5.5, and I look like an idiot. So I just wanted to kind of explain where I was at. We just hadn't even seen in that 2022 season, if it was still there, I was expecting a legendary season, and it just wasn't really anything all that good. Was it like a top 5-ish type season? Sure. But I thought a lot of the same concerns of Daniel Jones rushing on the goal line, scrambling instead of checkdowns existed with the Eagles, but I do just think Saquon's just kind of reinvigorated at this point, and it's an even better offense and an even better environment at this point. I will say I think the only concerns here are just simply that he's running hot right now with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith injuries kind of boosting up his reception totals, but in the end, I don't really think it matters. He would be in the conversation for 101 if we did a draft today. So the question becomes, where do we go from here? And this is what, to me, is really interesting. This is coping in bad faith. I literally said it on the screenshot. This is not me saying that Saquon is not going to finish as a top 3 running back rest of season. This is just simply saying it's early, right? We had 2022 where I thought I had a legendary season gift wrapped to me by Saquon Barkley. He goes from 22.6 points per game in weeks 1 through 3 to finishing at 17.8 points per game. You have a situation here. Saquon's the RB1, 28.1 points per game. Philadelphia offense is going to be top 10. Does Saquon keep it going? And that's the big question. Nobody really knows, but I think it's interesting to look at, right? Because a lot of you guys do want like the legendary running back kind of watch list here, and it's very hard to say. This is your top 9 point per game season since 2020. So over the last 4 years or like 5 years or so. And when we look at them, I took their, or no, this isn't it. When we look at them, hold on here. I'm trying to find like what, okay, this is what it was. So this is the 9 20-plus point per game seasons since 2020. And then in parentheses is how much points per game they had in weeks 1 through 3. So Kamara, 35.6 was amazing. McCaffrey was at 23.8. Dalvin Cook a little bit low at 21.6. But then these other like lower end, that's kind of this is the tricky part, is I think Saquon's actually a really good bet to potentially have this legendary season, right? Because those 3 up top, like your true legendary seasons are Kamara, McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook since 2020. Because once you get from Dalvin Cook to JT, it's 24 points per game down to like 21. So once you get down to there, this is kind of more of your optimism for guys like Bijan and like JT a little bit. JT, when he was the RB1 overall, 10.7 points per game in weeks 1 through 3. Eckler was 14.3 in 2022, 19 in 2021. Kyron was at 18 this time last year. CMC was at 15.3 in 2022. He ends up with 20.96. Derrick Henry was 2020, 17.2 weeks 1 through 3, ended at 20.8 at the end. So it's actually pretty crazy how most of these guys, like after Dalvin Cook, or even with Dalvin Cook, I think pretty much all of them actually improved on their points per game as the season goes on. So I still wouldn't get all that scared about guys like Bijan Robinson. And then the other side of this I wanted to show was a question I got was, so we've had this year Saquon, Kamara, Devon Achane, Kyron Williams, Breece Hall averaging 20-plus points per game through the first 3 weeks. So I looked at since 2020, RBs to have 60 or more PPR points in their first 3 weeks since 2020. So that's, 20-plus points per game or 60-plus PPR points. You have, again, Kamara. He finishes with 25.2 points per game. Then you have Saquon. We don't know, of course. Then Raheem Mostert last year. He finishes with 17.8. Kamara this year. Then Achane last year. He finishes 17.3. Then Jones. You can kind of see across the entire board. It's interesting where only 4 of the 13 running backs that hit 20-plus points per game in weeks 1 through 3 went on to maintain 20-plus points per game for the entire season. So I'm not really saying that Kamara won't or Saquon won't in general, but I mean, 4 divided by 13 is probably like 1/3. So you can kind of say 1/3 of the Saquon, Kamara, Achane, Kyron, Breece tier, right? So that's 5, 1/3 would be like 2. Probably 2 of these guys aren't going to finish with 20-plus points per game, which I think is like an interesting question. Where does Kamara end at the end of the season? Where does Saquon end? Nobody really knows. And again, like, it's tough to say who's not going to finish with 20-plus points per game. If there was going to be a true legendary season, my guess as of right now would be Saquon Achane, or Breece. Just for 20-plus points per game, I'd say any of the running backs on this list. And then you can honestly even stretch that all the way down to like... You can stretch that all the way down to your... I was going to say, yeah, like James Cook, Bijan, Jonathan Taylor, like anybody with over 15 points per game right now you can probably talk me into them maybe getting to 20 plus points per game. So there's still a lot of game left here. So that's why it's hard to pinpoint this year's legendary running back, and it's also tough to pinpoint is a guy like Bijan Cooked, right, where he has, like 15, 16 points per game. I do still think there's a lot of season ahead of us. I wouldn't panic yet on some of these underperforming high-end guys like Bijan. Now, let's talk about our third takeaway, and this is life without Tua, all right? First, I do want to mention this Seahawks defense is really good, all right? They have McDonald that they took from the Ravens as the D coordinator. He's their head coach. They have the second best EPA per play defense right now. Now, of course, you can say their opponents have been the Colts, their opponents have been the Dolphins this week, the Patriots before that, and then the Broncos before that. So 3 pretty rough offenses to go against, but I still do believe in this defense. So it was a tough matchup is really what I'm trying to say here. And then for what the Dolphins look like without Tua, it was brutal. That's really the nicest way I can put it. Miami had 205 yards, the third lowest total of the week. My only optimism here is you have to think Mike McDaniel, him calling plays, him wanting to scheme up good offenses. I got to imagine that things will improve. And I do think that we see Miami potentially acquire a quarterback, or Tua comes back from IR, around like week 6, week 7, and things kind of just pick up from there. But in terms of talking about what this offense looks like until some change happens, this is where I'm at. Now, first up, I would say the least scared I am is for Devon Achane. He was this week the RB7 in expected points per game, so he just had a ton of volume. Did he underperform that by a ton? Sure, right? Minus 9.9 is brutal, but that's going to happen against a good defense, and we know him to, even independent of a quarterback, we should see efficiency from him soon. I will say he's not all that efficient right now. 3.5 yards per carry. He was at like 7+ last year. I think we eventually find a happy medium here. We get some explosive plays from him. And then also the receiving work is just too good, right? Like at this point, he is in a really good spot where he's kind of more of like a volume play right now until things get better, but that's fine, where you can pretty much project him for like 18 plus points per game over this span. JJ Zach Reason had a good tweet here saying his 18.3% target share on the season is great, and then he hasn't dipped below a 16% target share in any single game. So Achane, I'm not all that concerned about. He goes to, I don't know what, you draft him as like a mid to back end RB1. That's where he's at with monster spike weeks in his range of outcomes. Now, the rest of the guys that get really hurt is Tyreek and Waddle, right? We just talked about volume-wise. Achane was the RB7. Volume-wise, Tyreek and Waddle were outside of the top 50 wide receivers this week. That is really not good. The only optimism here is week 6 bye. Do they get a new quarterback where they can maybe get up to speed? By then, do they get Tua? By then, who knows? But a quarterback upgrade should be coming, or just Mike McDaniel getting a more dialed-in scheme here. So, in terms of how I look at these guys rest of season, Tyreek Hill is now like a boom-bust wide receiver 2 in any game that Tua is not healthy, and Waddle is just a boom-bust flex. And I also got a question over on the Patreon. I will say I pretty much asked the Patreon what they even want me to talk about on a weekly basis, just to make sure I'm not leaving anything out. Somebody asked, where would you have Waddle rest of season? Like, where physically would you put him among the other receivers? This is my rest of season rankings from last Wednesday. I had him wide receiver 29. I probably move him down to that like Keenan Allen, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp tier of like brutal starts and Michael Pittman and just like quarterback questions. And then of course Keenan Allen, Puka, and Kupp are more injury related for Kupp and Puka. Keenan Allen also injury related, but then also quarterback related. So that's like your question mark wide receiver 4 area, and that's where he kind of gets plummeted to. Now, I will say as well, from that game, Miami versus Seattle, JSN had a down game, but when you win 24-3 and Sharp scores like 2 touchdowns and Metcalf has the broken play, it's tough for you to get any production there. Metcalf was the only receiver for the Seahawks over 10 PPR points. I'm not all that spooked. I'm not going to be like, week 2 was just kind of out of the norm. I think it's probably somewhere between the two moving forward. Then our fourth takeaway is a nice palate cleanser here. Just talk about the yucky offense in the Dolphins. Let's talk about Andy Dalton, the Hall of Famer. I don't know. I'm just joking there, but just like pretty insane, right? When we look at PFF offensive grade and EPA per play here from Kevin Cole, you have Bryce Young, bottom left, even worse than Thompson, all the way to Dalton, who's up there in like Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr, all the guys who've been performing this season up there, far and to the right. Just pretty crazy stuff. He picks up a 36-22 win. Dalton has 26 completions on 37 attempts, 319 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. With the way that the NFL has been thus far, 300 plus yards and 3 touchdowns is just like, that's like MVP stuff in this NFL right now. And what that did is we got a Deontay Johnson breakout game. He gives you wide receiver 5 production on the week. Overall, wide receiver 5 overall, 8 catches, 122 yards, 1 touchdown, 26.2 PPR points. And he goes from Bryce Young, where he had just 5 catches for 34 yards. You can see Underdog's tweet there, to Andy Dalton, where he gets a 37.8% target share this week after having a 21.8% target share with Bryce Young. So about 15% better target share. And of course, he produces this week. So absolutely huge. And then you can also give an upgrade to the running back. Also, like Xavier Legette, like I said, huge waiver wire pickup. The running backs get an upgrade as well when Jonathan Brooks comes back. And before then, Chuba Hubbard, I mean, he was, we look at the Devon Achane chart here. He is the RB3 on this list, which is just absolutely insane. He gets 20.9 expected points here. He outperforms that by 7 points and gives you a 27.9 point performance. The RB4 on the week on RB3 usage. That is brutal. Now, I will say, this offense is not going to drop 35 every game and throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. So, we're not going to hit. Deontay Johnson's not a wide receiver 1. Chuba Hubbard's on an RB1. But the bet with this team was for them to go from league worst in offense to average. And now that's very much looking to happen here. You have Andy Dalton, who can just maintain that, get the ball out on time. He had the fastest time to throw this week, or actually the fastest time to throw of any quarterback this season at like 2.08 seconds, which is crazy. And Canales, the scheme is there. We were bullish on this team because of Canales, and we are going to see him have, at the very least, like a top 20 offense, which is just going to make players startable here. So if you have any Carolina on your team, you can breathe a sigh of relief here. Then at number 5, to sort of go back into the treacherous bad quarterbacks from this week, we have Anthony Richardson. Our takeaway is just more bad quarterback play. First of all, from Anthony Richardson. Now, I will say this year is the defensive EPA per play. The Bears are 4th best right now. The Packers are 9th best. So the last 2 games, Richardson has struggled, but they have been against good defenses here. Here's the thing. He now sits at QB 11 in points per game with 15.7. And I want to talk about Richardson through 2 lenses here, because one lens is him as a quarterback supporting the pass catchers in fantasy and moving forward as a long-term option in Dynasty. And then the other is just him, the fantasy asset in 2024. You draft him in the 5th or 6th round as your quarterback 1. How do you feel there? I'd say my panic meter, if I did that, right, where I draft him in the 6th round in my quarterback 1, is about like a 6 out of 10. It's not crazy, right? Like 10 out of 10 is like sound all the alarms, go crazy. I'd say 6 out of 10. It's not great, but like I said, it's worth noting 2 of these games have come against really good defenses. And then also, when we look at Rich Rebar's little thread here, this is the thing that's really concerning, right? Because we have 2 games so far where he's given you 25 plus fantasy points with just 9 and 11 completions in those games. So that's a lot of production on the ground. The issue is that scrambling is a tendency stat, right? Like Justin Herbert is one of the freakiest athletes at quarterback in the NFL, but he's not out there running like he's Cam Newton or Josh Allen. Here's the issue with Richardson. Rebar says, growing sample that Richardson hangs in the pocket and his rushing output is reliant on designed usage. His 7.3% scramble rate when pressured is 28th in the NFL since last season. He has a lower scramble rate at per pressure, to start this year than Rodgers and Goff. And that's actually the funny thing about Richardson is just the reason we loved him so much in Dynasty was because he is an alien in that he is this freak athlete, rushing quarterback that doesn't bail on pockets for scrambles or take bad sacks. He either throws the ball out or he makes himself enough time to make a throw downfield, which is really cool. That's not something that happens, right? Justin Fields is one of the worst in terms of pressure to sack rate. If he gets a pressure, he's going to take a sack. If he gets a pressure, he's going to convert that into a scramble, which is fine for fantasy, but those are worse plays for your offense than a pass or a completion. Richardson is actively hunting those out, but it's hurting his fantasy production because of that, which is not good. Now, he has 23.3 passing points on the season. Andy Dalton had 24.8 passing points today. So that's just literally no rushing, just your passing total for fantasy purposes. Not great. Small samples, but we need that rushing production or he is going to be the worst pick at ADP for quarterbacks. The Colts have a 31.2% success rate per passing play compared to a 47.9% success rate on rushing plays. 5th in the NFL, passing 31st in the NFL. Here's what I'll say. It's a long season. Dak Prescott was at 13 points per game at this point last season. Then he finishes with 22. A lot is still going to happen here. It was just Richardson's 7th start. There's a lot of growth that can happen here. But I will say when we look at long term, he's definitely trending in the Justin Fields direction. Now, I will say Justin Fields has had a good fantasy season before, which we could definitely see for Richardson. But he is certainly trending in the direction of not a franchise quarterback. Instead of, like Jalen Hurts had these questions heading into his second season. He sort of disproved them all and was the franchise guy for the Eagles. Justin Fields did not. Richardson is now on that pathway. He is under 50% completion percentage at this point. He is bottom 5 in EPA per play. But the upside is very clear. Again, he had those 25-plus point games on just 9 and 11 completions. So if you can find a way to marry the rushing game with like 20 completions, then we're talking about a guy who can just like break fantasy. But a lot does have to happen for things to go right. I will say he does get a tough matchup this week versus the Steelers. Could definitely be talked into finding something else off of waivers to stream this week while you kind of wait for Richardson to figure it out. Now, in terms of Richardson, the distributor, right, if I have Michael Pittman, if I have Josh Downs, if I have A.D. Mitchell, 10 out of 10 on the panic meter, sound all the alarms. Nothing is going well enough for anything to happen in this passing game. Richardson is now producing less than 200 yards passing per game this season. Michael Pittman has been useless, and now Josh Downs comes in, 73% of the routes. He relegates A.D. Mitchell, 28% of the targets, 90% slot snaps. All pretty good usage for a slot guy. 5.2 fantasy points here from Dwayne McFarland. Not great. So it's like he's going to be on the field, but if Richardson is the quarterback, it's not going to matter a ton. Downs, Pittman, all of these guys, not startable until Richardson somehow really improves as a passer. Then you have Jonathan Taylor. For me, it's all the way wheels up for JT. He had something weird happen in week 2. There was some kind of report that maybe him and Steichen kind of had a back and forth. And I wouldn't call it a benching, but just something weird that happened at the end of last game. If you look at his week 1 and 3 game logs on the utilization report over on Fantasy Life, really good usage in weeks 1 and 3, right? 95% of the snaps, 87% of the snaps. 88% of the routes, 91% of the routes. He had a 12% target share this week, 13% last week. He also had 100% of the 2-minute drill snaps. So, and an 8.9, you can see the score thing. That's their usage score, which is just based on all of their usage. How good is that? 8.9 is really, really, really good. He gives you 26.5 PPR points this week. If JT can sustain this kind of workload, this kind of usage, we could see JT make a late run at a 20-plus point per game season. Then the other quarterback that stunk it up was Deshaun Watson, of course. He had under 200 passing yards on 37 attempts. He kind of faked it in the box score with like 196 yards and 2 touchdowns and looked all right, but the amount of attempts that he had, his yards per attempt was brutal. Benjamin Solik says here, he leads the league in total dropbacks to Deshaun Watson. Excluding Bryce Young, who has been benched, he is last in the league in total QBR, yards per attempt, and yards per dropback, success rate, explosive play rate. The Browns are throwing the ball a ton and getting nothing for it. Now, the interesting part is they are using a lot of dropbacks. They're using a lot of fantasy usage to the wide receiver position, as pointed out by Hayden Winks here. we have the Browns there in terms of neutral pass rate. They are second highest in terms of getting volume to the receivers. They are way up there as well. We have 7 catches this week, 86 yards, 2 touchdowns for Amari Cooper, who could have an even better season at this point if Deshaun Watson wasn't there. And Hayden makes a good point. We could see Jameis Winston come on here, just give us that Joe Flacco goodness down the stretch where Amari Cooper becomes great, David Njoku becomes great, and things start humming here. Especially, there is something about, the Panthers bench their quarterback and now see all the success. Maybe we see Kevin Stefanski start to kind of debate the same thing because of that. Now, our 6th takeaway is tight ends still suck. Now, I don't know why I'm struggling to talk here, but it is what it is. We're getting through this. Tight ends still suck. Every single time I come to the podium here and I try to say, everyone calm down. It's fine. It's fine. It's not fine. I'm definitely panicking. If you have Mark Andrews, it's looking really, really rough. Mark Andrews had 35% of the routes. He had 7% of the targets. You could see here, this is from the utilization report. He had 35% of the routes this past week, 7% of the targets, down from 70% of the routes and 12% of the targets. So now he just becomes unusable. Now, this was, of course, because it was a weird game script. The Ravens ran the ball a lot. They're trying to find their identity right now as a running team. This is from Nathan Yonke over at PFF. And by personnel, Mark Andrews is out there for 11 personnel, 12 personnel. But then once we get to this fullback, 21, 22, 20 personnels, you're going to see Mark Andrews slip there, where Charlie Kolar is viewed as the run-blocking tight end, where Mark Andrews gets subbed out. And that is pretty awful for Mark Andrews. So the game script yesterday lended itself to the run game away from Mark Andrews. He goes from an elite tight end to a bottom, tight end 1, right? Just because tight end's so weak right now. But he's in your Hunter Henry, Tyler Conklin bucket at this point. It sucks to say, but that's just kind of what it is. Then we also have Travis Kelce. This one I'm a little bit less spooked on, but still not feeling great. When we look at the volume for the tight end position, Travis Kelce comes in as the tight end 10 with 8.3 expected points per game. Again, that's just based on your volume. It's not great. You have to think that better days will be ahead here for Kelce, but there is something about this Chiefs team where they just win games with ease, and they're just not all that interested in getting Mahomes an MVP and trying to air out the ball and put on sexy offense, especially in prime time. So it's tough. That's not good for Worthy. That's not good for Travis Kelce. It's not good for Pat Mahomes if you drafted him as your quarterback. So all around the Chiefs, definitely some panic setting in. I wish I had more positive words there. Laporta and McBride get hurt, so that's a huge wrench into things. Then you have Kyle Pitts, who had a huge 49-yard catch, but just 2 catches for 59 yards. Could have been 3 catches for 60 yards and 2 touchdowns, right? He gets tackled on the 1 on the big play, and then the last drive of the game for the Falcons, he gets an end zone target where he's held by a Chiefs player, and it's just tough because sure, that highlights his upside, right? Huge target in the red zone. He has a high 8-out where he's making plays downfield, but it's so boom bust because you're getting so much gadget usage for Darnell Mooney, for Ray McLeod, for the running backs in this offense, and we're seeing his first read target share, which is just from fantasy points, just, are you the first read on this pass play? 6.3%. Brutal, man. Brutal. Down from his years with Arthur Smith. He's just not a focal point. Now, maybe this changes moving forward, but it takes him out of the elite tight end conversation for sure. He is now just a boom-bust tight end 1, which is fine, but to me, the only true elite tight ends at this point, and, we're struggling to find one. Kittle, it would have been Kittle, right? A lot of that Jawan Jennings stuff would have went to Kittle this week, but he's hurt. McBride, he's hurt. And then Brock Bowers, who was a rookie attached to Gardner Minshew. So tight ends are brutal right now. At least you can kind of find solace in the fact of everybody's tight end sucks, but that would mean that late tight end was the way to go. So tough right now for the elite tight end bros. Then we have our 7th takeaway here. The Kyron Williams punt return concerns were dumb. And I'll even put my hand up and say, we moved him down a little bit. And I will say, we really only moved him down half a round and behind Saquon, funny enough, when that news came out. But to me, I thought when he was going to be out there doing punt returns, it wasn't because of injury or anything like that. It was just a huge sign that they liked Blake Corum. That is obviously not the case. Blake Corum has really only gotten run here in garbage time. We had Kyron Williams yesterday put up 24 carries, 89 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 receptions, 27 yards, and a touchdown. He's not very efficient, but he is just a complete volume hog. He scores touchdowns. You have Mike Clay here. Kyren leads the NFL in expected touchdowns, and his 7 carries inside the opponent's 5-yard line are 2 more than any other player. He's 7th in carries, 1st in routes, 5th in touches, 1st in touchdowns, and 4th in fantasy points among running backs. So he's a very much locked and loaded RB1 rest of season. He has just 2 punt returns this season, and actually the most recent punt return for the Rams was by Xavier Smith. He returned it like 40 yards and was actually a huge piece of winning this game for the Rams, which means Kyren Williams is probably no longer going to be on the punt returns. And I will say, huge PSA, do not drop Blake Corum. Do not drop Blake Corum. The thesis of drafting Blake Corum was never to start him in week 3. It was this usage right here that you're seeing highlighted by Mike Clay, right? 1st in routes, 7th in carries, 5th in touches, 1st in touchdowns. The minute Kyren goes down, Blake Corum inherits 90% of that, which is a top 12 weekly starter. So you stash him, not for now, but if Kyren ever goes down, Corum is a league winner. And that was always the play. If you drafted him thinking something else, I don't know. But I will also say, huge W for Puka and Kupp this week. Weirdly enough, the Rams getting this win was massive. They get a division win over the 49ers. You can see here just like a really gutsy win. Stafford playing some of his best ball. They were behind the entire game. Win probability had them losing the entire time. They pull it out of thin air. And instead of going 0-3 and like punting the season and like potentially trading away some assets for picks because they're so, draft capital depleted on this team, we get a win. They're 1-2. They're going to build on this momentum going forward. And what that gives us is by the time Puka and Kupp potentially coming back after this week 6 bye for the Rams, we have a reason for them to come back earlier and try to play and, try to win games with this team. So massive stuff. Our 8th takeaway, J.K. Dobbins Takeover. Of course, Dobbins has his worst game of the week, but usage-wise, the best game of his season so far. He gives you 15 carries, 44 yards, 3 catches for 10 yards. He had the Steelers defense. We can really put some respect on their name for sure, but when we look at their weekly share of backfield touches for the Chargers from John Daigle here, he had 52% in week 1, 46.1% in week 2 in terms of share of backfield touches to 85.7% here. And Gus Edwards hit season lows with 36% of the snaps, 15% of the rush attempts. I think we are very much on Gus Edwards' healthy scratch for Kamani Vidal watch. So Kamani Vidal probably going to be on our waiver wire video as well. I will say the Herbert injury sucks for this offense. It's a bummer. I will say he is an Iron Man. Like if anyone's going to play, it's going to be him. He played last year with a broken finger and he had like the crazy wrap on it. Heineke's serviceable until then. Maybe Herbert doesn't miss any time. But we should have Kamani Vidal as the RB2 here. And then J.K. Dobbins, if he's going to have like a 70% plus, 75% plus backfield share here, he's going to be like a borderline RB1 rest of the way. Then I want to talk about some murky backfields here for our 9th takeaway. First, we have Bucky Irving and we have Rachaad White. Bucky Irving so far, over 100 plus rushing yards. And we can see from Nathan Yonke here, it's an up and down list, but you have running backs with 100 or more rushing yards through 3 weeks over the last 5 seasons, rookies, and then they're finishing PPR points per game. You have James Robinson, JT, Gibson, like the only bad running backs, the only running backs that didn't finish inside the top 30 in PPR points per game was Joshua Kelly. Everyone else sticks out as pretty dang good. Bucky Irving, again, he's like not someone you need to start. He's trending there. He gives you 9 carries for 70 yards this past week. He gets 3 catches for 14 yards as well. Just really, really nice stuff from Bucky Irving. And this is where we're going to see. The work is going to start tilting in Bucky Irving's favor. It's already starting to a little bit, little by little. We look at the utilization report over on Fantasy Life. Again, make sure you check them out. Their utilization report is sick. It comes out literally the morning after the Sunday games. And things are trending down for Rachaad White, sure. 73% of the snaps is actually a season high, but in terms of touches, he only had 38% of the rush attempts. Bucky Irving had more rush attempts and just outproduced him on the entire year so far. This is actually a tweet from, do we have it? Yeah, from Mason here. 31 carries for 66 yards for Rachaad White, 24 carries for 145 yards for Bucky Irving. Something has to change, and Todd Bowles from Underdog here has already indicated that, saying Bucky Irving has earned more snaps moving forward. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we start to see the scales tip on this backfield again. I've never said that Bucky Irving is going to have the 1A 60-40 split here, but we could very much see a clean 50-50 split happening here. Rachaad White now just the RB 23 in expected points per game, a guy you were drafting for his volume. Then we have Zamir White, and God, man, you can cut Zamir White if you'd like to. I mean, I just can't believe it for a team that wanted to establish the run. And even then, when you get inside the 5 and you have Zamir White who's yoked up, and I didn't even like Zamir White, giving that to Alexander Madison, this is your utility from this past week on Fantasy Life. You can see Alexander Madison, 13.4 PPR points. He gets 42% of the snaps. He gets all of the inside the 5 stuff. But then now you have Amir Abdullah working in for 34% of the snaps. Zamir White, of course, has most of the rush attempts, right? 10 rush attempts, though, of a team 14. So on a team like the Raiders that are never going to hold leads, and then if he's going to get the rush attempts, but then not even punch them in on the goal line, it's clips. If you're in a 10-team league, Zamir White is literally someone you can cut. He is yet to hit 7 or more PPR points this week. Then we have the Bears backfield. This is just kind of murky backfields because the starter has been so bad. Swift has been terrible. This is now his lowest snap share on the season. This is from just this week, by the way. Roschon Johnson now in the mix with Travis Homer on IR. Roschon actually ends up with the best utility. He's out there getting targets. He's out there getting rush attempts. He's out there running routes. He's the 2-minute drill and third down back. You have Khalil Herbert getting used on the goal line, but only 10% of the snaps. I do think we're going to have a pretty nasty 3-way split here, and I think that we're going to see Swift get slowly phased out. This is somebody, I mean, dude, he had 13 carries for 20 yards this week. He is now, potentially the league's worst rusher here. This is just straight up rushing yards over expectation per attempt, sorted the wrong way. He has 1.8 yards per carry, minus 21 expected points added. He's costing his team right now. At a certain point, the Bears are going to say, well, we paid this guy a ton, but he is costing us even more than the money we paid for him. So Swift is somebody not droppable, but huge downgrades, and Roschon Johnson and Khalil Herbert should be rostered in most places. And then we also have, we'll keep that up because Javonte's also been brutal. You can see Javonte on that same graphic, minus 2 rushing yards over expected per attempt. Just really not good from Javonte. And what that does is it adds Tyler. Apparently they're calling him Tyler Bidet. Tyler Bidet is in the mix here. 38% of the rush attempts. He had the most carries on this team. Jaleel McLaughlin still in his same role, but Javonte goes from his best usage, right, 63% of the snaps, 65% of the rush attempts, down to 52% of the snaps and 21% of the rush attempts. Just terrible. He had 5 carries for 12 yards. He had 4 catches, 29 yards. He had a fumble. And then the Broncos win to add insult to injury or whatever. So now you have a situation where the Broncos win after kind of putting Javonte to the side, just kind of positive reinforcement. Not great. I don't think Tyler Bidet is really a waiver wire ad. It's going to be tough. Maybe in super deep leagues. He was a fun dynasty guy once upon a time. Then I want to talk about KC. Right, this is the first game where we had Carson Steele, where we had Samaje Perine, and this is how it's split up on the utilization report. You can see it was a 65-35 split towards Carson Steele. Carson Steele has the better utility. He had more rushes. He actually ran more routes than Perine, which is really bad for Perine. He had the short yardage stuff on lock, inside the 5 stuff on lock. Of course, third down and 2-minute drill stayed with Samaje Perine. Just 8.4 PPR points for Carson Steele, 7 for Samaje Perine. I think the box score looks closer than it was. You had 17 carries and 2 targets for Carson Steele. 19 opportunities is great. And then Samaje Perine, 6 carries, 4 targets, 10 opportunities. Not bad. So I think moving forward, we could see Samaje Perine again. He's still new with the team. We could see him, get that back to 50-50. But for now, Carson Steele is definitely the RB to own by this usage. He's, running routes. He's out there getting the goal line carries. He's going to be a high-end RB3 moving forward, and probably even more than that in really good matchups where the Chiefs are favored by a touchdown. Then I want to talk about Jets versus Patriots. We talked about Saquon up top. Let me have a little victory lap here. We have the Namath jersey in the background. Look at this, man. The Jets, the takeaway here is that the Jets finally have a quarterback. I mean, look at, I can't even fathom that. This is, for the first time in my life, a quarterback on the Jets in the top right of EPA per play, of PFF offensive grade. And the Jets right now are converting a league high 56.8% on their third downs. They were dead last year at 26%. The Jets now have a top 10 EPA per play offense, which is huge for the touchdown and the yardage upside of Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. Now, for some reason, there is some panic on both of these players. Garrett Wilson, right, it hasn't been great through 3 games. This is something Dwayne McFarland tweeted after his first 2 games. Still running a ton of the routes. 29% of the targets is great. 45% of the air yards. Better days are ahead. He had matchups against the 49ers, and then he had a matchup against L'Jarius Sneed, and then he had a matchup against Christian Gonzalez. Better days are ahead. The Jets, they're just starting to kind of get into the rhythm as well, where Aaron Rodgers, you could tell, taking on a delay of games early, didn't really look at himself against the 49ers. He's now really starting to hum, which I think is going to be really good for Garrett Wilson, who's the wide receiver 10 in expected points per game at 16.2, but he's, of course, underperforming that. But the usage tells us he's getting top 12 type of usage, so I think better days are ahead for Garrett Wilson. And then people are somehow panicking on Breece for the Braylon Allen usage. I mean, he's still at 20-plus points per game. He's the RB4 in expected points per game. He still has the highest usage score on Fantasy Life. And then also, I thought that these 2 tweets were good. This is from Addison Hayes here. Breece Hall is on pace for 260 carries, 963 yards, 91 receptions, 680 receiving yards, 17 total touchdowns, which would have been the RB2 in 2023, just 34 fewer points than CMC. And I think Jacob puts it well here. People are going to tilt Braylon Allen's usage all year, and Hall is still going to have 25 to 30 adjusted opportunities per game, which is carries, plus 2 times targets, and tons of receptions and goal line carries. High-value touch pies. My God. All right. But the high-value touch, I don't know why I'm like starting to tear up from that. I don't know. My throat's just dry. We've been talking for an hour straight here. But high-value touch pie is always big for Rodgers running backs, and Hall is the best running back in the sport. Biggest error people make, in my opinion, in comparing RB roles is looking too much at rate statistics, not at how the team prioritizes running backs or not within the scope of their offense and what kind of touches each running back gets. It's especially bad during island games, but Fantasy Twitter has a compulsion to treat any usage from any player at the same position as an existential threat, as though it's a zero-sum game, and it's not. You can take usage from other pies. So what he's saying pretty much is that because of Rodgers, right, he had the Breece Hall had the go ball versus Tennessee, where Rodgers just knew, okay, it was against a linebacker, you're running a go ball there. So you're going to get a lot of high-value touches from Rodgers' offense. You're going to get a lot of receptions. You're going to get a lot of touchdowns, a lot of green zone touches. And so will Braylon Allen eat into that? Sure, but it's going to be a bigger pie of running back fantasy goodness than pretty much any backfield not named Detroit or like maybe Miami with a healthy Tua in the NFL, which means there's going to be plenty to go around. Again, Breece is already at 20-plus points per game. I'm really not sweating it, and he's not really seeing efficiency running the ball right now. Once he gets that going, we'll be really cooking. So I don't know. I mean, does like a true legendary RB1 break fantasy season now get lowered? Sure. Can he still finish as the RB1 overall? Yes. And is he still a top 5 pick at worst if we were to redraft teams today? Yes. So if you drafted Breece Hall, don't pout. Don't complain. Is Braylon Allen in the mix? Sure. But did you draft Christian McCaffrey? Did you draft, the first round was pretty brutal, all right? The first round was pretty brutal. Breece Hall, probably, him and Jefferson are like the best you could have done in the first round anyways. So that is going to do it for us today. As always, make sure to check out Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code Ron. Make sure you check out the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. And as always, appreciate you guys for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my